Hey guys, welcome back to week 4 of the Prepared series. This is the final week. If you haven't seen the 3 previous weeks, you don't need to have watched it, but I would recommend seeing them. But week 4 of the Prepared series. Week 1 we talked about David, we talked about Paul. Week 2 we talked about Joshua. Week 3, and now we're going back before any of them. We saw how all 3 of them were prepared and how them being prepared relates to us, and now we're going to go back before all of them and talk about Moses. And I'm really excited about this one. I think there's some good stuff in this one, but let's jump into it. Let's start off by talking about his story, how Moses got to the point where he was called by God to lead the people of Israel. So, let's start at the beginning. He was born. He was born to a time when the Israelites were slaves in Egypt, which was most of the time they were in Egypt, but he was born into that time. He's born to a time where the Pharaoh ordered all males to be killed because he wanted the Israelites to stop repopulating. So all male Israelites that were born were to be killed. So Moses, his mom, she had Moses and she didn't want to kill him. She could see that this child was special, so she hid him away. She kept him safe for about 3 months till he started to get too big, too rowdy to keep hidden efficiently. So she did what any responsible parent would do and built a basket, waterproofed it, and shipped her child down the Nile. She sent Moses' sister to watch after him and make sure he got somewhere safely and that someone picked up the basket. And what a stroke of luck. Who else to pick up the basket but Pharaoh's own daughter? And you think if Pharaoh's ordering males to be killed, he wouldn't like his daughter adopting one, but she did. But Moses was still too young for her to take care of. She was not ready to take care of a baby. So he sends Moses' sister to find a woman to take care of him, to raise Moses till he's old enough for her to take care of. And who does his sister go and get? Well, his mom. So Moses, even though his mom just sent him away to keep him safe, came right back to her. And Moses' mom ends up raising him till he's old enough to be adopted by Pharaoh's daughter. Eventually, he is old enough, and he's raised, and he was nurtured by his mother, and he's adopted by Pharaoh's daughter. And she names him officially Moses, and he gets his name. And he'll be Moses from that point on. But, so, after he leaves his mother's nurturing, he grows up the rest of the time in Pharaoh's home. He is Pharaoh's adopted grandson, and he knows who his people are. He says it. It says he goes and visits his people to see what they're doing. But he's growing up basically in an Egyptian home. But one day he goes to visit his Israelites, to visit his fellow people, and he sees an Egyptian slave runner beating up on one and abusing one. And Moses does something that's a little sketchy. He murders him. It happens. He murders the Egyptian and hides his body in the sand. This causes a lot of problems for Moses. First of all, it makes the Israelites a little scared of him, but second of all, his adopted grandfather, Pharaoh, not a big fan of this, and he tries to kill Moses. Moses runs away. Moses runs to a place called Midian. And there he finds himself in more wacky antics. He's chilling by a well, and 7 girls, the 7 daughters of Midian priest, comes to get water for their flock. But apparently in Midian, there's shepherds that are just too cool for school and like to bully other people out of the well. And they basically bully the girls away and bully away their flocks. It says Moses came to the rescue. It doesn't tell us how he came to the rescue, but I think it's safe to assume murder's off the table. I think he got that out of his system. But he somehow rescues the girls and draws all the water for them. The priest hears this and basically invites Moses to come have a meal with him. And the meal must have gone pretty well because he gives one of his daughters hand in marriage, and now Moses has a wife. So he spends a lot of time in Midian. He becomes a shepherd, basically, for the priest. And his son-in-law, he has a wife, he has a kid. But one day, Moses is taking the flock nearby a place called Mount Sinai, where Moses wanders. And there he finds a moment that's very iconic. He runs into the burning bush, where an angel of the Lord is sitting there waiting for him and calls his name to come. this is where God calls him to lead the people of Israel. And what does Moses say? Moses refuses and tries to find any way out of it he can. Moses wants someone else to do it. But why? Like, was Moses not prepared to lead the people of Israel? Is that why he refused? Well, let's take a look. So much for my comfy couch. Let's go. All right, back to where we started with David. So was Moses prepared? Was he? Well, let's run through the roster. Let's start with David. How was David prepared? Well, David was prepared through his past talents coming back to roost. His shepherding skills protecting the sheep came back to roost with Goliath, and his harp playing with getting him into the castle. So his past prepared him for his future. But does Moses really have anything like that? I mean, he's being called to lead a group of people and basically rule them and to lead them. He didn't really lead people before this. I mean, he was just a son up until now and then a family man. I guess he led his family, but this is a much larger family. But he led his family. Not only that, he was a shepherd, so he learned to lead animals. So the Israelites can't be much different. But when he decided to start a family, he not only led his family, but he was a shepherd. But on top of that, when you think about it, when you think about ruling and like experience he would have gained with leading people, whose home did he grow up in? What family was he adopted into? He was adopted into Pharaoh's family. His adopted grandfather was the leader of Egypt. He was around leadership, would have seen diplomats and overheard diplomatic conversations and overheard how to rule a kingdom. Now, he might have not done it directly, but he was around that culture and that environment. So between the shepherding, leading his family, and literally growing up in the leader of Egypt's family and home, yeah, you could say that Moses' past experiences did prepare him for this moment, even though it might not be inherently obvious. So that kind of rules out David. Let's see if maybe one of the others has something in store. Okay, so maybe Moses' past fits the bill with David. Let's look at Saul. Let's look at the Saul to Paul change and see how maybe that relates. Or if he was prepared in any way like that. Saul to Paul, he had this eye-opening moment where God transformed him from a devout Jew to a devout Christian. He went from killing Christians to being one himself. He went for this transformation because God took something away from him and changed his life forever. Now, Moses doesn't really have anything taken away from him, or it might not look like it. He does have an eye-opening moment, though, where God speaks to him directly through the burning bush, where an angel of the Lord comes and lights the bush on fire and talks to him. He has that eye-opening moment. But, I mean, not a lot's taken away, except his life. He's a simple shepherd now, and that's all about to change. God's about to rip that away from him, because he's now about to be the leader of the Israelites. Never again after this will he be a simple shepherd. But that doesn't really seem like the problem that Moses has here. And Moses has his eye-opening moment. This moment where God tells him what he wants. How more prepared can you be than knowing exactly what God wants from you? Your exact mission. He has his eye-opening moment like Saul did, where he transforms from just a follower to a leader. But he still says no at that moment, even though God's telling him exactly what he needs to do. No room for misinterpretation. Well, I guess Saul's not the answer, because he clearly fits that eye-opening moment. So let's move on out of this rain. Okay. Joshua had people around him all his life. He had godly people to rely on to help him, prepare him for his future. Did Moses have that? Well, I mean, spent a lot of time with his adopted parents, right? Or his adopted mom and his adopted grandfather in Pharaoh's castle. That couldn't have been a too godly environment for him to grow up in. Maybe that's why he didn't feel like he was worthy to like take over. He didn't feel qualified. He didn't spend enough time. He wasn't around godly people to have godly influence. Well, if you think about it, who did Pharaoh's daughter pay to raise Moses? Moses' mom. Moses' Israelite mother, who would have known the pact to Abraham, would have known the pact to Isaac, would have known the pact to Jacob. She knows their history. She knows God, and she would have taught Moses about that even from a young age. Moses would have that ingrained in his memory. He grew up with a godly woman, and his siblings nonetheless. Not to mention, he knew who his people were. He knew who his Israelite people were. He defended his Israelite people against the Egyptian slaver. So he definitely spent some time around godly people, and nonetheless, like, not to mention, when he leaves Egypt, when he runs away to Midian, what's his father-in-law's profession? He's a priest of Yahweh, which Moses will eventually discover is the same God as his people. The Israelites had just forgotten that. He is like his father-in-law is a priest. Like he's around godly people and has godly influences. So, like, he was prepared in that way too. So why did he say no? Well, let's talk about that. Okay. Whew. All right. So he was prepared for this. He seemed very prepared to lead his people. So what was it? See, the thing is, Moses didn't feel qualified to lead his people. Moses was prepared. We can look at how, same way David was prepared, Paul, Joshua, like, he was prepared, but he didn't feel qualified. And this, as something I can relate to, I know in my ministry career so far, I've had multiple times where I did not feel qualified. And I get it. But someone once told me something that changed my perspective on this, and you can see this in the story of Moses, that God does not always call the qualified, but he always qualifies the called. Moses didn't want to lead his people. He didn't feel qualified to lead his people. He wanted someone more qualified than him to lead his people. He was prepared for it, but he didn't feel qualified for it. Now, if we watch the story, the first mission, you could say, that God sends him out on, it's Moses and Aaron. But Aaron quickly drops out of the way. Moses quickly realizes he is qualified, that God has made him qualified. God tells him, I will be with you, and I am with you. So, Moses was prepared for this. We see Moses was prepared in so many ways to lead a group of people, to lead his people. But he didn't feel qualified. But God does not always call the qualified, but he always qualifies the called. So, if you're struggling with having been called by God to do something, or you feel called by God to do something, but you don't feel like you're qualified, like you're the one that should be doing it, just know God does not always call the qualified, but he will qualify you to do whatever he calls you to do. Moses went through this, I've gone through this, and someday maybe you'll go through this. So just remember, if there's something that you feel like God is calling you to do, and you don't feel qualified, he will qualify you to do it, and you will be qualified if you aren't already. So that wraps up Prepared, and how, in a couple of ways, that God prepares us for our future. And even if we're prepared and we don't feel qualified, how he just qualifies us to do whatever he calls us to do through being with us and through his strength. I really enjoyed this series. This series was a lot of fun. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope to see you all soon. See ya.